The rain in Xanadu City's Brick Lane slum didn't fall, it seeped. It seeped through corrugated tin roofs, through the cracks in walls stuffed with old newspaper, and into the bones of those who called its maze-like alleys home. Mei-Ling felt it in her joints as she hurried through the narrow passage, a canvas bag of salvaged electronics parts clutched to her chest. The smell of wet concrete, frying grease, and sewage was as familiar as her own breath. At 18, her life was a ledger of small survivals. Today's victory: 3 intact motherboards from the trash bins behind the tech bazaar, which old Chen would trade for a week's worth of rice noodles. Mei-Ling, your useless hide is back late again. The screech came from the doorway of a cramped ground floor flat. Mrs. Lim, her adoptive mother, stood silhouetted against the flickering light of a cheap television, her face a permanent sculpture of bitterness. The woman who had taken her in as a swapped infant, a favor for a debt long since repaid with interest through Mei-Ling's labor. The bins were picked clean. Had to go farther, Mei-Ling said, her voice flat. Years of practice had sanded the emotion out of it. Excuses. The stove needs fixing. And your brother needs help with his homework. Mrs. Lim spat the word brother like it was a joke. Her biological son, Lao, was sprawled on the floor, glued to a racing game, ignoring them both. Mei-Ling just nodded, sliding past her into the damp, single-room apartment. This was the sum of her world: a pallet on the floor, a shelf of mended tools, and the constant, grinding weight of belonging nowhere. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving a grimy haze. Mei-Ling was at the communal tap, rinsing soot from her hands, when the black sedan glided into Brick Lane. It was so absurdly out of place it seemed to warp reality around it. Doors opened, and 2 men in impeccable suits emerged, their shoes somehow avoiding the murky puddles. One was older, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that scanned the surroundings with clinical detachment. The other, younger, held a tablet. They walked straight toward her. Mei-Ling Zhou? The older man asked, though it wasn't really a question. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her patched trousers. Who's asking? My name is Arthur Ko. I am a senior legal counsel for the Tan family group. He presented a card that felt heavier than it should. We have conclusive genetic evidence that you are the biological daughter of Mr. Jiahao Tan and Mrs. Ariel Tan, CEO and heiress of Luminous Group. You were involved in an infant switching incident 18 years ago at Xanadu General. The words hung in the humid air. Behind her, she heard Mrs. Lim's sharp intake of breath, then a string of muttered curses. The entire alley had gone quiet, neighbors peering from windows and doorways. You're mistaken, Mei-Ling said, but her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. A wild, dangerous hope she had strangled years ago stirred in its cage. There is no mistake, Ko said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He gestured to the car. Your parents wish to see you immediately. To bring you home. Home. The word was a foreign currency. She looked back at Mrs. Lim, whose face had contorted from shock to a familiar, venomous rage. Go, Mrs. Lim hissed, her voice low and terrible. Ungrateful wretch. I took in a stray and this is my thanks? Get out. And don't think you can come crawling back when their fancy life spits you out. There was nothing to pack. Nothing that belonged to her, anyway. Mei-Ling walked to the car, the weight of 1,000 stairs on her back. She didn't look back. She had learned long ago that nostalgia was a luxury for the well-fed. The journey from Brick Lane to the Celestial Heights district was like traveling through a portal to another planet. The grime and chaos fell away, replaced by sweeping boulevards lined with sculpted magnolia trees and sleek, silent buildings that gleamed like polished stones. The car ascended a private road, winding toward a compound that wasn't a house, but a statement in glass, steel, and native limestone. The Tan residence. It looked less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to its own magnificence. Inside, the air was cool, scented with sandalwood and orchids. A woman in a silk cheapao dress glided forward. Ariel Tan was breathtakingly elegant, her beauty sharp and flawless. But her eyes, as they scanned Mei-Ling from her worn sneakers to her too-thin frame, held a profound shock, quickly masked by a film of polite distress. Mei-Ling, she breathed, the name awkward on her tongue. She reached out as if to touch Mei-Ling's cheek, then seemed to think better of it, her hand fluttering back to clasp the jade bracelet at her wrist. My child. Look at you. A man entered from a steady Jiahao Tan. He had a powerful stillness about him, an energy of controlled force. His gaze was more direct than his wife's, sweeping over Mei-Ling with an intensity that felt like an appraisal. "The resemblance is undeniable," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Welcome home." Before Mei-Ling could process this, a sound of muffled sobs came from the staircase. A girl descended, around Mei-Ling's age, ethereally beautiful in a way that spoke of careful cultivation. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her lower lip trembling. Serena Tan. The girl who had lived Mei-Ling's life. I'm so sorry," Serena whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "This is all so overwhelming. I need some air." She moved as if to flee, but then stumbled, clutching the banister. It was a performance of exquisite vulnerability. Ariel was at her side in an instant. "Serena, darling, it's all right. No one is blaming you." "Of course not," Jiahao said firmly, though his eyes flickered to Mei-Ling. "This was a tragedy, not anyone's fault. We are a family now. A larger one." Serena lifted tear-filled eyes to Mei-Ling. "I'm so happy you're back. Truly. I've always felt like something was missing." She offered a wavering smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mei-Ling said nothing. She had spent a lifetime reading the subtext in shouts and silences. This delicate ballet of guilt and possession was just another language to learn. Ariel showed her to a guest suite, a room larger than the entire Brick Lane flat, with a bathroom that glittered. "We'll have your proper room prepared tomorrow," Ariel said, her smile tight. "Rest. Dinner is at 8. Alone, Mei-Ling walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, a koi pond shimmered under strategically placed lights. The silence was profound, unnerving. She felt like a specimen under glass. A soft knock came hours later. It was Serena, holding 2 cups of tea. "I thought you might be thirsty," she said, her earlier distress replaced by a gentle concern. "It's jasmine. Very calming." "Thank you," Mei-Ling said, accepting the cup. The porcelain was thin, delicate. Serena lingered, her gaze drifting around the sparse room. "It must be so strange for you. All this space." She sighed, a hint of her earlier sorrow returning. "I want you to feel at home, Mei-Ling. Truly. Whatever you need." She reached out and squeezed Mei-Ling's hand, her touch cool. "We're sisters now." After she left, Mei-Ling placed the untouched tea on a shelf. She busied herself with the only task that felt real, inspecting her salvaged parts, lining them up on the pristine desk. As she lifted her canvas bag, a folded piece of thick, creamy paper slid out from an inner pocket where she was sure she'd put nothing. It was a scanned copy of a bank transfer receipt, dated 2 days prior, showing a payment of 50,000 Xanadu dollars from an anonymous account to one listed under M. Joe, her name. A handwritten note was scrawled at the bottom, "For services rendered. Keep quiet." A cold understanding settled in Mei-Ling's gut. The tea. The squeeze of the hand. Serena had slipped this into her bag during that fleeting contact. The message was clear: you may be the blood daughter, but you are an outsider. I can frame you, disgrace you, and make you disappear. I was here first. Mei-Ling stared at the damning paper, then at the glittering, hostile paradise outside her window. A slow, sharp smile touched her lips, the first real one all day. Back in Brick Lane, survival meant enduring blows. Here, it seemed to mean dodging daggers wrapped in silk. She carefully folded the paper and tucked it not into her bag, but into a hidden seam inside her jacket. She didn't drink the tea. Instead, she poured it into a potted orchid by the window, watching the leaves glisten under the moonlight. The game had begun before she'd even known she was a player. And Mei-Ling, veteran of 1,000 smaller, dirtier wars, felt a grim pulse of recognition. This was just another alley fight. The lights were just brighter. She turned from the window, her reflection a ghost in the glass against the darkening city. "Okay, Serena," she thought. "Let's play." Jade Heights Academy didn't educate students, it curated future rulers of Xanadu City. Its campus sprawled across manicured hills like a kingdom, its buildings a blend of traditional sweeping roofs and brutalist concrete, old money meeting new power. As the Tan family car pulled through the wrought iron gates, Mei-Ling felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. She wore the mandatory uniform, a navy blazer with the school's phoenix crest, but it hung on her frame like a costume. Her guide was Kaido Tan, her newly discovered brother, who slouched in the passenger seat radiating displeasure. At 19, he possessed the carefully crafted carelessness of the perpetually privileged. Stay close, don't touch anything expensive, and for heaven's sake, don't tell anyone you lived in Brick Lane, he said without looking at her, scrolling through his phone. Serena's worked years to build her reputation here. Try not to demolish it in a day. I'll do my best, Mei-Ling said, her voice neutral. Her first class, Advanced Economics, was a theater of whispers. The teacher, a man with a weary smile, introduced her. Class, this is Mei-Ling Tan. She's joining us for the remainder of the semester. A girl with perfect eyeliner leaned toward her friend, just loud enough. Tan? But Serena is the only Tan in our year. Is she, like, a cousin from the provinces? Mei-Ling took the only empty seat, right in front of a boy with intense eyes hidden behind thick-rimmed glasses, who was dismantling a graphing calculator with a tiny screwdriver. He didn't look up. The lesson was on market manipulation. The teacher used examples from Luminous Group's takeover of a rival telecom. Mei-Ling listened, cross-referencing what she knew from black market tech traders about the real impact of those corporate moves: the shuttered factories in the Iron District, the spiked data prices. When the teacher posed a hypothetical about asset stripping, Mei-Ling answered not with textbook theory, but with the cold arithmetic of survival: you'd liquidate the health plan first. It's the most expensive loyalty and the easiest to blame on market forces. The room went quiet. The teacher blinked. The boy behind her stopped fiddling with his calculator. Kaido found her at lunch in the vast, sun-drenched refectory. Serena was holding court at the center table, surrounded by a glittering cohort. She waved Mei-Ling over with a warm, public smile. Everyone, this is my sister, Mei-Ling. Be nice to her, she's still adjusting to civilization. The group laughed, a polite, tinkling sound. A boy with the chiseled features and arrogant posture of a born champion leaned forward. Kenji Watanabe. Student council president, heir to the Watanabe shipping empire, and, if the gossip in the car was correct, Serena's sometime boyfriend. So, you're the mystery heir, he said, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. Serena's been worried sick about you fitting in. We have a tradition here for new students. We call it the Phoenix Run, a little scavenger hunt. Helps you learn the campus. We've already prepared your first clue. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Serena's eyes widened with feigned concern. Kenji, be gentle. It's her first day. Mei-Ling opened the envelope. The clue was a riddle pointing to the old clock tower. She felt the expectation like a physical pressure. This was a test, a public sorting into either prey or player. Thank you, she said, standing. I could use the exercise. The scavenger hunt was an elegant humiliation. The clues led her to the boys' locker room, where a group roared with laughter, then to the kitchen dumpsters, and finally to the school's rooftop garden, where the final prize waited: a single, worn-out sneaker, identical to the one she'd arrived in, dangling from a flagpole. A crowd had gathered below, phones raised. Kenji and his friends stood at the front, grinning. Serena was there too, her hand over her mouth in apparent horror. Oh no, who could have done this? Mei-Ling, I'm so sorry. Mei-Ling looked at the sneaker, then at the sea of sneering faces. A familiar, cold calm settled over her. This was just another Brick Lane shakedown, with better scenery. Instead of rage or tears, she tilted her head, studying the sneaker. The stitching on the heel is frayed diagonally. That happens from a specific, repetitive friction. Like working a pedal on a sewing machine in Mrs. Hank's sweatshop in the garment district. She turned to the crowd, her voice clear and carrying. Kenji, your family owns Watanabe Textiles, which contracts to Mrs. Hang. Did you requisition this from a factory floor for your prank? I hope you paid the worker for it. Their daily wage is about what your cologne costs. The smiles vanished. Kenji's face tightened. A different kind of whisper rippled through the crowd. She hadn't reacted like a victim, she'd reacted like an investigator. It was then that the boy from her economics class, the one with the calculator, appeared at her elbow. The rooftop access log is digital, he said quietly, not looking at anyone. I could pull it. See who came up here before third period. He spoke to Mei-Ling, as if they were continuing a private conversation. Kenji's eyes narrowed at the newcomer. Stay in your lane, Lee. Leo Lee just pushed his glasses up. It's a school server, Watanabe. The lane is public domain. The crowd, sensing a shift in power dynamics, began to dissipate. The spectacle was over. Mei-Ling had refused to perform. Later, hiding in a forgotten annex of the library to avoid the stares, she found Leo there, surrounded by a nest of wires and open laptops displaying lines of code. "You didn't pull any log, did you?" she asked, leaning against a bookshelf. "Of course not. That would be unethical," he said, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "But Watanabe doesn't know that. He's terrified of data he can't control." He glanced at her. That was quick thinking, with the stitching. Observation. "It's a useful skill." She nodded at his setup. "You're the scholarship student. The genius. Guilty. And you're the fairy tale heir. The street rat Cinderella." His tone wasn't cruel, just factual. "They hate you because you're a variable they didn't account for. Serena has been the undisputed queen of this zoo for years. You're a threat to the ecosystem. Why are you talking to me? Won't it hurt your standing?" Leo snorted. "My standing is maintained by my ability to fix their grade servers and keep their embarrassing chat logs buried. They need me more than I need them." He turned a laptop toward her. On the screen was a sleek, password-protected interface. "They also have a little side hobby. An underground betting ring. Phoenix Bets. They wager on everything: sports outcomes, exam scores, which teacher will have an affair. Who will break first?" Mei-Ling scanned the screen. She saw familiar names: Kenji, Serena, Kaito. The stakes were astronomical. "And you have access." "I have the server. They rent hosting from a shell company I control." He looked at her, his eyes sharp behind the glasses. "I heard about your market analysis and econ. You have a mind for odds. I have a proposition." That evening, back in the Tan mansion, the tension was veiled in silk. Dinner was a silent, multi-course affair. Jiahao asked about her day. "It was educational," Mei-Ling said, carefully using her soup spoon the way Ariel had demonstrated. "I'm learning the local customs." Serena smiled sweetly. "Kenji told me about the silly prank. Boys can be so juvenile. I'm glad you weren't upset." "Not at all," Mei-Ling said, meeting her eyes. It was illuminating. Later, in her room, she opened the encrypted chat window Leo had installed on her school tablet. "Leoli, first bet pool is live. They're betting on you failing your first calc quiz. Odds are 3-1 against you. They've collectively wagered 20k Xanadu. Mei-Ling, what's the take if I win?" "Leoli, the house, me, takes 10%. The rest would be yours." 18k Mei-Ling, I don't have money to wager." "Leoli, you have collateral. Your story. Your mysterious past. I'll front you the buy-in. 50-50 is split on the winnings." Mei-Ling stared at the message. It was another game, but this one was played in a currency she was starting to understand: information and leverage. "Mei-Ling, what's the catch?" "Leoli, I want to see the system break. And I think you're the hammer." She looked at the shelf where the forged bank receipt was hidden. Serena had made the first move. Kenji had made the second. It was time to stop reacting and start acting. "Mei-Ling, change the odds." "Leoli?" "Mei-Ling, don't just let me beat the bet. Manipulate the pool. Create a rumor that the calc quiz has been leaked. Drive the odds in my favor, then bet against me. We take their money twice." There was a long pause on the other end. "Leoli. You're terrifying. I'm in." Just then, a soft knock. It was Ariel Tan, holding a velvet box. "I thought you might like this," she said, opening it to reveal a delicate hairpin of white jade. "It was your grandmother's." Her expression was complex, a mix of guilt, duty, and distant curiosity. "Thank you. It's beautiful," Mei-Ling said, taking it. Ariel lingered. "Serena. She's delicate. This transition is hard for her. She fears being replaced." It was a plea disguised as an explanation. "I understand," Mei-Ling said. And she did. She understood that in this house, love was a finite resource everyone was fighting for. After Ariel left, Mei-Ling didn't look at the hairpin. She opened her school bag and took out the only thing that felt truly hers, her salvaged motherboard. Under the light of the crystal chandelier, she began tracing its circuits with her finger, a calming ritual. The cool logic of silicon and solder made sense. The warm, treacherous logic of family did not. She had survived the day. She'd made an ally of sorts in Lee, and an enemy of Kenji Watanabe. She'd begun a financial guerrilla war within the school's underbelly. And she'd kept the framed receipt, a tiny sword of Damocles, tucked away. As she lay in the impossibly soft bed, staring at the ceiling, the words of an old Brick Lane fortune teller came back to her. You will walk between two worlds, child, and be claimed by neither. Your strength will be your loneliness. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow was the calculus quiz. Tomorrow, she would start claiming things for herself. The silence of the tan mansion at dawn was a different creature than the silence of Brick Lane. Here, it was a vacuum, thick and expectant. Mei-Ling had awoken at 5 a.m., a habit carved by years of early shifts and the need to claim quiet before the world's noise began. She sat on the balcony of her new, permanent room, the one with the walk-in closet and east-facing view, and ran through calculus problems on her tablet. The 18,000 Xanadu dollars she and Leo had won from the manipulated quiz bet was now a discrete digital stack, her first true currency in this new world. At breakfast, the atmosphere crackled with a different energy. Jia Haotan stood at the head of the table, not eating, his presence commanding the room. Ariel fussed with a vase of orchids, and Serena picked at a dragon fruit salad, her eyes flicking between her father and Mei-Ling. Kaido slouched in, smelling faintly of sandalwood and regret. I have an announcement, Jia Hao began, his voice leaving no room for inattention. Luminous Group's next phase of growth lies in immersive digital experiences. To that end, we are targeting a strategic partnership with Celestial Bay Tech. A ripple of recognition went around the table. Celestial Bay was the enigmatic darling of the tech world, known for its cutting-edge holographic interfaces and notoriously reclusive founder, Eris Thorne. Eris Thorne does not take meetings. He grants audiences, Jia Hao continued. He values innovation, but more than that, he values cultural resonance. He wants technology with a soul. He let his gaze fall on each of his children. This will not be won by a polished sales pitch. It will be won by understanding the man. He placed a simple, cream-colored envelope on the table. The child who secures a memorandum of understanding with Celestial Bay will receive a 10% equity stake in Luminous Group. The air was sucked from the room. 10%. It was a fortune that could buy entire blocks of Brick Lane. It was a voice in the boardroom. It was legitimacy. Kaido straightened, his nonchalance evaporating. Serena's eyes gleamed with avarice. She quickly masked with a demure smile. What a wonderful opportunity for us to prove ourselves, father. The rules are simple, Jia Hao said. You have 3 weeks. Use any resource at your disposal, except direct interference from my office. I want to see your minds at work. The game was on. By lunchtime, Serena and Kaido had formed a brittle alliance. They commandeered the sun-drenched conservatory as a war room, spreading out glossy dossiers on Eris Thorne compiled by the family's research department. His hobbies are listed as classical music and conservation, Serena mused, tapping a manicured nail on the page. We could host a private concert at the Symphony Hall. Donate a wing to the Xanadu Aviary in his name. Boring. Predictable, Kaido said, though he looked at the numbers for the Aviary wing with interest. Everyone tries to buy his favor. We need an angle. What does he crave? Mei-Ling, excluded from the huddle, took her lunch to the library, the real one, not Leo's Tech NX. She requested every magazine profile, every interview transcript, every patent filing connected to Eris Thorne. The official narrative was consistent, a genius who emerged from nowhere, obsessed with blending technology with intangible human experience. But official narratives, Mei-Ling had learned, were just the surface paint. That evening, she video-called Leo from her balcony, the city lights twinkling below like a scattering of low-tech stars. I need you to go deeper than the PR fluff, she said. Social media is scrubbed. Find the archives. University forums. Old server logs. What did he do before Celestial Bay? Who was he? Leo's face was illuminated by the blue glow of multiple monitors. You're asking me to ghost hunt a billionaire. I like it. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He went to MIT. No, Wade transferred there after a year at the Xanadu Institute of Traditional Arts? Huh. Traditional arts? That didn't fit the profile of a tech titan. Degree in digital design, but his elective transcripts are a weird mix. Kinetic sculpture. History of ephemeral media. Leo squinted. There's a cached post from a defunct student forum, username Stormchaser. Talking about kite making? Kites. The word triggered a memory. Not from a dossier, but from the smell of glue and silk, from the crowded balcony of her old Brick Lane building. Old man Feng, 2 floors down, his hands gnarled but steady, creating magnificent, intricate kites that flew like dreams over the slums' rooftops. He'd called them Fengjing, wind harps. He'd said the best weren't just toys, they were dialogues with the sky. Leo, Mei-Ling said, her mind racing. Find me everything on kites of the 4 winds. Not the tourist stuff. The old craft. The philosophy. Her next move was not to the business district, but back to Brick Lane. She went on a Saturday morning, not in the Tan family car, but on the public Skytram, dressed in simple clothes. The familiar smells: fried dough, diesel, open drains wrapped around her like a ghost. Old man Feng was on his balcony, as always, applying a delicate brushstroke of paint to a silk kite frame shaped like a celestial carp. He didn't look up. Xiao Mei, he grunted, using her old nickname. Heard you flew to a golden branch. What brings you back to the rot? I need your wisdom, Feng Bo, she said, using the respectful title. He finally glanced at her, his eyes sharp in a wrinkled face. Wisdom is cheap here. What do you need it for? To speak to a man who has everything. I need to talk about kites. Not as souvenirs. As dialogues. Feng Bo put down his brush. He looked at her for a long moment, then gestured to a rickety stool. For the next 2 hours, he talked. He spoke of balance and tension, of the soul of bamboo and the whisper of silk. He explained how a truly great kite was not controlled, but negotiated with the wind, a partnership between human intention and natural force. Modern people, he spat, they want drones. Stupid machines that obey. A kite is alive. It resists. It teaches. He gave her a small, unfinished kite frame. The bones are nothing. The intention is everything. Meanwhile, Serena and Kaito's campaign was in full swing. Paparazzi shots appeared in society blogs of them touring the aviary with architects. An exclusive article teased a fusion gala they were planning, Symphony Under the Stars, with a program supposedly curated to Thorne's tastes. Mei-Ling worked in silence. With Leo's help, she dug deeper. They found a forgotten grant proposal Thorne had written as a young man, rejected by all major foundations. It wasn't for a tech project, but for preserving the oral histories of traditional craftsmen across Asia, using then nascent audio technology. The title, Anchoring the Future in the Voice of the Wind. The voice of the wind. Kites. She didn't plan a gala. She didn't commission a building. She asked Leo to use his skills not to hack, but to create. Using Thorne's own publicly available holographic SDK, she and Leo built a simple, elegant simulation. It wasn't a product demo. It was an experience. The user would wear a light VR headset. They would see their own hands, and in them, the unfinished bamboo frame Feng Bo had given her. A voice over Mei-Ling's own, calm and clear, would guide them through the philosophy of each step, selecting the silk, for its resilience, tying the knot, for balance, not domination, painting the design, intention made visible. Then, the simulation would let the kite go. The user would feel the tug of the digital wind, see their creation dance in a sky of swirling datastream and ancient cloud patterns. The final message would appear: true innovation isn't a louder voice. It's a better listener. She packaged the simulation on a custom-built, elegant data crystal, housed in a box of sustainable bamboo. No corporate logo. Just a small, embossed line from Thorne's old grant proposal: to hear the future, we must first listen to what the wind carried from the past. The night before the 3-week deadline, Kaito struck. Mei-Ling was finalizing her presentation when her school tablet and personal phone began to vibrate incessantly. Notifications exploded across her screens. She opened a trending social media feed. A video was going viral. It was grainy, shot from a hidden angle in a messy room. It showed a younger, exhausted-looking Mei-Ling, at maybe 16, handing a wrapped package to a grim-faced man in a leather jacket. The caption read, "Tan family's lost heiress? Or Brick Lane's best courier?" What was the package, Mei-Ling? Drugs? Stolen tech? Hashtag scandal in heels, hashtag fake heiress. The comments were a torrent of venom. The narrative was perfect, the gritty street rap past, repackaged as evidence of criminality. It threatened to obliterate not just her bid for the partnership, but any shred of social standing she had. Serena found her in the hallway, her face a mask of perfectly crafted sympathy. "Oh, Mei-Ling, I just saw, it's awful. Who would do such a thing? Don't worry, we'll hire the best crisis managers. We'll sue." Mei-Ling looked past the performance, to the glittering satisfaction in Serena's eyes. Kaito stood further back, leaning against a wall, watching with a smug neutrality that confirmed everything. The forged bank receipt had been a warning. This was a declaration of war. Ariel was wringing her hands. "Jiahao, this is a disaster. The shareholders will see. The partnership is ruined." Jiahao's face was granite. He looked at Mei-Ling, not with pity, but with assessment. "Well? Is it true?" Mei-Ling took a deep breath, the cold, sharp clarity of a crisis settling over her. She met his gaze. "The man is Uncle Chen, a licensed electronics recycler. The package contained repaired tablet motherboards. The video is edited to remove the audio where he thanks me for the repair and pays me $50. It was my job." She turned her phone, showing a scanned copy of a dated, but official, business license for Chen's repairs and recycling, and a blurred but recognizable still from the full video showing the exchange of cash. Leo had worked fast. "This isn't a scandal," she said, her voice quiet but cutting through the panic. "It's a smear campaign. And it was launched the night before Father's deadline." She let her gaze rest on Kaito, then Serena. "I wonder who felt so threatened by a simple proposal that they needed to try and destroy the proposer." The silence that followed was electric. Jiahao's eyes narrowed, moving from Mei-Ling's proof to his other children's faces. Mei-Ling didn't wait for the fallout. She turned and walked back to her room. She had a data crystal to deliver. The game wasn't about being the most pristine. It was about being the last one standing. And Mei-Ling had been standing on much shakier ground than this her whole life. The video scandal, which Kaito had christened Guttergate in his more smug moments, didn't vanish, but it mutated. Leo's counter-evidence and a sharply worded cease and desist from the town legal team, ordered by a furious Jiahao, pushed it from the mainstream feeds into the darker, persistent corners of the web. The damage was measured not in headlines, but in glances. The calculating stares at the academy grew heavier, the polite smiles at family functions more brittle. Mei-Ling had been branded with a permanent question mark. She won the partnership. Eris Thorne's personal assistant, a woman with a voice like cool marble, called the Tan estate directly. Mr. Thorne had been intrigued by the philosophical approach of the kite simulation. He agreed to a 6-month exclusive development deal with Luminous Group, with Mei-Ling named as liaison. The 10% stake was transferred to a trust in her name. There was no celebratory dinner. Jiahao nodded at her over the financial reports, a glint of something like respect in his eyes. Ariel fretted about what she would wear to the eventual contract signing. Kaito disappeared for 3 days. Serena presented her with a hideously expensive pen set. "For all the contracts you'll be signing now, sister," she'd said, her smile a razor wrapped in velvet. The victory felt hollow, a chess piece taken in a game whose true board she couldn't see. It was in this state of wary suspension that she found the note. It was slipped under her bedroom door on a Tuesday night, on a piece of cheap, pulpy paper that smelled of dust and damp. The handwriting was spidery, urgent. "Your grandmother, Lean Tan, didn't vanish." She was silenced. "The answers are not in the shining towers, but in the shadows they cast. Look in Ember Hollow. Find the Blue Dragon Tea House. Ask for Rohan. Trust no one." Mei-Ling's blood went cold. Her grandmother was a family ghost, mentioned only in passing, Jiahao's mother, a formidable woman who had helped build Luminous, who disappeared suddenly on a trip to the northern provinces when Jiahao was young. The official story was a hiking accident. A closed casket. A quiet, permanent grief. Silenced. She searched her memory of the family archives. She'd briefly accessed sterile records of mergers and profits. Nothing about Lean Tan's passions, her conflicts, her voice. The next day, she casually asked Ariel over tea in the orchid garden. "Father never talks about his mother. What was she like?" Ariel's hand, holding a porcelain cup, froze for a fraction of a second. "Lean was a force of nature. A visionary. She saw potential where others saw blight. She set the cup down, a soft clink in the quiet. Her death was a great tragedy. It changed your father. It's a painful subject. Best left in the past. Where is she buried? I'd like to pay my respects. Ariel's gaze drifted to the mist-shrouded hills north of the city. There is no gravesite. She was lost in the mountains. We have a memorial plaque in the family columbarium. She stood, smoothing her dress. I have a committee meeting. Don't wander too far today, dear. The air is bad in the city. Don't wander. A warning disguised as concern. Ember Hollow was the bruised underbelly of Xanadu's relentless ascent. While the city shot skyward with glass and ambition, the hollow had sunk, a neighborhood of crumbling Art Deco facades and labyrinthine alleys clinging to the steep slopes of Mount Serenity. It was infamous, the site of the city's last great textile mill fire 30 years prior, a place of failed redevelopments, gang violence, and superstition. People called it cursed. Mei-Ling went on a Saturday, dressed not in silks but in sturdy, dark clothing. She took 3 different skytrams and walked the last mile. The air did change, growing thicker, carrying the scent of old incense, frying grease, and the faint, metallic tang of the abandoned cable car lines. The Blue Dragon Tea House was a faded jewel, a ground-floor establishment with once vibrant blue tiles now cracked and stained. Inside, it was dim, smoky, and alive with the low murmur of elderly men playing mahjong and the clatter of dominoes. The proprietor, a wizened woman with eyes like black pebbles, looked up from wiping a counter. We're full. I'm looking for Rohan. The woman's gaze sharpened. She looked Mei-Ling up and down, lingering on her face. You have her eyes. The set of the jaw, too. She jerked her head toward a beaded curtain at the back. Through there. Up the stairs. Don't linger on the 3rd-floor landing. Old Mrs. Chen throws things. The staircase was narrow and groaned underfoot. The 3rd-floor landing was littered with chicken bones and smelled of cat urine. A door was cracked open, a single, hostile eye visible in the darkness. Mei-Ling hurried past. The door to the rooftop was unlocked. She stepped out onto a cracked concrete terrace, a jungle of potted herbs and dying plants. A man sat slumped in a rusty wrought iron chair, a bottle of cheap Baijiu at his feet, sketching furiously in a large, battered notebook. He was in his late 40s, perhaps, with the wrecked handsomeness of a fallen monument, sharp cheekbones shadowed by stubble, hair streaked with gray and tied back, clothes stained with ink and clay dust. Rohan Chandrasekhar? She asked. He didn't look up. If you're from the City Planning Commission, the answer is still no. If you're from Luminous Group's thuggish acquisition department, you can jump off this roof and save us both the trouble. I'm Mei-Ling Tan. Lean Tan was my grandmother. The charcoal stick in his hand snapped. He finally lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot but intelligent, blazing with a bitter, undimmed fire. Tan. He spat the word like a curse. Of course. The prodigal heir. Come to see the human cost of your inheritance? I came because someone told me you knew what happened to her. He laughed, a harsh, scraping sound. What happened? She saw the future, and it was a monster. She tried to stop it, so they erased her. He took a swig from the bottle. Your father's precious Phoenix Rise project? The one that will revitalize Ember Hollow into luxury condos and artisanal bubble tea shops? It was her dream first. But her dream had room for the people who already lived here. For the history. For the soul of the place. He flung his notebook toward her. It skidded across the concrete. Inside were not just sketches, but beautiful, intricate architectural renderings. A vision of Ember Hollow restored, the old cable cars running again as scenic lifts, the textile mills converted into artist studios and affordable housing, green roofs cascading down the hillside, a vibrant community woven into the old fabric. At the bottom of each page was a small, elegant signature, Lean Tan, in collaboration with R. Chandrasekhar. She hired me, fresh out of school, full of ideals, Rohan said, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. We worked on it for 2 years. It was glorious. Then she went to the board, your grandfather's old board, dinosaurs who only saw profit per square foot. They laughed. They said her vision was sentimental charity. She threatened to go public, to use her own shares to rally the smaller investors. He stood up, unsteady, and walked to the edge of the roof, looking out over the decaying, beautiful maze of Ember Hollow. A week later, she left for a walking tour of the northern mountains. She was an experienced hiker. Her body was never found. Just some torn clothing near a notorious cliff. The board voted unanimously to shelve the Ember Hollow project. For decades. Mei-Ling's heart pounded. You think they killed her? I think inconvenient people in the way of billions have a habit of falling, Rohan said bitterly. And now, decades later, her own son resurrects the project. But not her vision. His. A surgical, sterile, profitable excision. No community. Just product. He turned to her, his eyes boring into hers. And the beautiful, cruel irony? The one leading the social outreach, smoothing over the displacement concerns? It's that perfect porcelain doll of an adopted daughter. The one whose real mother was the only person who stood by Lean at that final board meeting. The world tilted. Serena's mother? Elara. Jiahao's half-sister. Wild, brilliant, a journalist. She was going to publish an investigation into the board's property deals. Rohan's face darkened with a profound grief. She died in a fire. Right here in Ember Hollow. A tragic accident in a condemned building she had no reason to be in. 2 women who saw the truth, 2 accidents. Now the project is back, and the only remaining piece of Elara, her daughter, is the smiling face of the machine that swallowed her mother. The pieces slammed together in Mei-Ling's mind with terrible force. Serena's fear, her desperate clawing for position, her need to belong. It wasn't just greed. It was survival in a family that had already consumed her true mother. Did she know? Why are you telling me this? Mei-Ling asked, her voice hushed. Because you have her eyes, Rohan repeated, his anger spent, leaving only a vast exhaustion. And because the note you got? I didn't send it. Someone else wants this story to come out. Maybe they think a new Tan, an outsider, can break the cycle. Or maybe they're just setting you up for a harder fall. He picked up his bottle. Now get out. The stench of wealth is spoiling my view. Mei-Ling descended the stairs, the beautiful, tragic renderings burning in her mind. As she passed the 3rd-floor landing, a wrinkled hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed her wrist. She stifled a yelp. Old Mrs. Chen's face was a map of wrinkles and suspicion. You. Tan girl. Her voice was a dry leaf rustle. You tell that father of yours. The hollow has eyes. We saw the men in nice suits, the night of the Elara woman's fire. We see the surveyors now, with their maps that have no room for us. She thrust a small, soot-stained object into Mei-Ling's hand, a half-melted hairpin, in the shape of a dragonfly. Hers. Found it. After. Tell him we remember. She released Mei-Ling and vanished back into the dark. Mei-Ling stood on the busy street outside the Blue Dragon, the melted hairpin hot in her palm, the weight of 2 generations of silenced women pressing down on her. She looked up at the gleaming towers of Celestial Heights, where her father's office plotted the erasure of this very place. She had thought she was fighting for a place at a table. Now she wondered if the table was built on graves, and if her true inheritance wasn't wealth, but a debt of truth. Her tablet buzzed. A message from the Luminous Group events coordinator, a reminder, the shareholder briefing on the Phoenix Rise project is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your attendance, as a major new stakeholder, is requested. Mei-Ling pocketed the hairpin. She would attend. And for the first time, she would look at her father, her sister, and the grand designs of her family not with awe or hunger, but with the cold, clear eyes of an investigator standing on cursed ground. The Luminous Group headquarters, the Aurora Tower, was a needle of light piercing the Xanadu skyline. Stepping into its soaring, marble-clad atrium felt like entering a temple to capital. The air hummed with silent efficiency, and everyone moved with the purposeful glide of those who believed they were shaping the world. Mei-Ling, in a tailored dove-gray pantsuit that felt like someone else's skin, rode the glass elevator to the 50th floor auditorium, the melted dragonfly hairpin a secret, searing weight in her pocket. The shareholder briefing for the Phoenix Rise project was a masterclass in sanitized ambition. Giant holographic renders floated above the stage, showing a shimmering, sterile Ember Hollow transformed into Serenity Heights, geometric parks, vertical gardens clinging to mirrored facades, serene skybridges connecting luxury residencies. The people in the renders were attractive, ageless vignettes, yoga on decks, sipping coffee at minimalist cafes. There was no sign of the chaotic, vibrant, crumbling mess of the real hollow. Jiahao Tan was in his element. Gone was the conflicted father, here was the visionary CEO, his voice resonating with conviction. He spoke of renewal, elevating the city's tapestry, and responsible, visionary development. The numbers he flashed were dizzying: projected returns, valuation spikes, economic uplift. Then Serena took the stage. She was luminous in a cream-colored dress, her poise perfect. She spoke not of square footage, but of community synergy and honoring the spirit of place. She introduced a glossy, heart-tugging video featuring a few carefully selected, photogenic elderly residents of the Hollow, speaking about looking forward to a safer, brighter future. It was a breathtaking performance, weaving a narrative of benevolent stewardship that sanitized the brutal calculus of displacement. Mei-Ling watched, her stomach tightening. She saw not her sister, but the ghost of Alara, the journalist mother used as a prop to sell the erasure of her own legacy. The dissonance was deafening. The Q&A session was a parade of softballs from sycophantic analysts. Then, as it was winding down, Mei-Ling pressed the button at her seat. A soft chime echoed. Every head in the room, including Jiahao's and Serena's, swiveled to the section reserved for major stakeholders. To her. Mei-Ling Tan, the moderator announced, a hint of curiosity in his voice. She stood, feeling the heat of the spotlight. Thank you. The renders are impressive. My question is about the existing architectural and social fabric. The pre-war buildings in the Hollow have unique Art Deco and vernacular features. The Blue Dragon Tea House, the old cable car engine house. What percentage of these historically significant structures are incorporated into the final design versus demolition? A silence fell. The holographic renders flickered slightly. On stage, Serena's smile remained fixed, but her eyes cooled by several degrees. Jiahao's expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. An excellent question, Serena answered smoothly, stepping forward. Our design team has conducted extensive surveys. While we deeply respect the past, many of these structures are tragically beyond repair, unsound, and a public hazard. Our commitment is to the future vitality of the community. However, we are exploring a commemorative art installation that would reference some of the motifs of the old neighborhood. Motifs. Not homes. Not history. Motifs. Mei-Ling nodded as if satisfied and sat down. The damage was done. A single, precise needle prick in the balloon of consensus. She had publicly, politely, hinted that the emperor had no clothes, or at least, that he was wearing clothes stolen from a corpse. The briefing ended. As the crowd milled, Mei-Ling felt a hand on her elbow. It was Ariel, her face pale with controlled alarm. Darling, that was very specific. People might think you're not fully supportive of the family vision. I was just asking for clarification, Mother, Mei-Ling said innocently. As a stakeholder, due diligence is expected, isn't it? Before Ariel could reply, a junior assistant approached. Ms. Tan? Mr. Tan would like to see you in his office. Jiaha's office was a glass-walled area with a 360-degree view of his domain. He stood with his back to her, looking out over the city that spread towards the smudged silhouette of Ember Hollow. You've been to the Hollow, he stated, without turning. Yes. And you spoke to Rohan Chandrasekhar. It wasn't a question. He's a difficult man to miss. Jiahao finally turned. His face was unreadable. He is a brilliant architect with a ruined career and a drinking problem. He is also a conspiracy theorist who clings to sentimental fantasies. The past he and my mother dreamed of was never viable. It would have bankrupted the company and left the Hollow to rot. He showed me her plans, Mei-Ling said, holding his gaze. They were beautiful. Beauty doesn't house shareholders, Mei-Ling. He walked to his desk, his movements precise. What happened to my mother was a tragedy. What happened to Alara was a tragedy. Dredging it up helps no one. It only brings pain to Serena and jeopardizes a project that will finally bring progress to that stubborn patch of ground. He leaned forward, his voice dropping, not with warmth, but with strategic intensity. You have a sharp mind. You won the Thorn deal. That is where your focus should be. The future. Not the ghosts of the Hollow. It was a command disguised as mentorship. A warning wrapped in praise. I understand, she said. But she didn't. She understood that he wanted her compliant, her curiosity funneled into profitable channels. The hairpin in her pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the silk lining. That evening, she didn't return to the Tan estate. She went to Leo's tech warren in the library annex. "I need two things," she said, pulling up a chair beside his humming servers. "First, a full financial workup on Kaido. Not just his allowances. His debts. His secret accounts. Everything." Leo whistled softly. "Turning the spotlight on Big Brother? Risky. He tried to bury me. I want to know what he's hiding in his own backyard. Second, I need a secure, untraceable way to hire a consultant. And set up a private digital workspace." "Consultant?" "Rohan Chandrasekhar." Leo's eyebrows shot up. "The drunken ghost? Why?" "Because he's the only one who remembers what the hollow was supposed to be. And I'm going to pay him to remember it for me." While Leo worked his digital magic, Mei-Ling used her new stake dividends to open a private, numbered account. She drafted a contract herself, drawing on the blunt, practical language of Brick Lane deals, not corporate legalese. It offered Rohan a retainer to act as a historical and contextual consultant on the Phoenix Rise project from an alternative stakeholder perspective. The deliverables were vague: sketches, notes, oral histories. The goal was explicit: to document what would be lost. She had it messengered to the Blue Dragon in a plain envelope stuffed with cash for the first month's retainer. She didn't expect a reply. 2 days later, a soiled napkin arrived at her academy locker, sealed in a clean bag. On it, in charcoal, was a breathtakingly detailed sketch of the old cable car engine house, not as a ruin, but restored, with gears polished and windows gleaming, integrated into a new public plaza. At the bottom, one word: consulting. A fierce, sudden grin spread across Mei-Ling's face. She had her first ally. Leo's report on Kaido came next. It was a disaster in spreadsheets. Kaido's losses in the underground betting rings were far worse than imagined. He wasn't just in debt to friendly peers, he'd gone to professional lenders. The biggest was a loan shark operation operating under the front of Jade Tiger Capital. And Jade Tiger, Leo discovered by peeling back layer after digital layer, was wholly owned by a subsidiary of Vanguard Acquisitions. The notoriously aggressive firm Luminous had hired to handle site consolidation in Ember Hollow, the firm responsible for pressuring residents to sell. The connection was a live wire. Kaido's personal vice was funding the very thugs squeezing the hollow. Did Jiahao know? Was Kaido being used as a puppet, or was he just a stupid, spoiled kid? And over his head, Mei-Ling now had a dangerous mosaic: her grandmother's ghost, her aunt's murder, a corrupted project, a brother in the pocket of the enemy, and a sister serving as its smiling mask. She couldn't fight this alone. The alliance with Rohan was a start, but she needed eyes, ears, and trust on the ground. She returned to Ember Hollow, not to the Blue Dragon, but to the cramped, warm apartment of old Mrs. Chen, the woman with the dragonfly hairpin. She brought simple gifts: good tea, medicine for her joints, and most importantly, a printed copy of Rohan's sketch of the engine house. She laid it on Mrs. Chen's rickety table. "This is what could be. Not what they are planning. I want to help stop the demolition. But I need to understand what's really happening. Who is being pressured? How?" Mrs. Chen studied the sketch with watery eyes, her fingers tracing the lines of the restored building. She looked at Mei-Ling for a long, hard time. "You are a Tan." "I am also the girl who carried circuit boards for old Chen to feed herself," Mei-Ling replied softly. "I know what it is to be pressured." Something shifted in the old woman's face. She called to a grandson in the next room, a lanky teenager named Min. "Take her to the community board. Let her see the map." In a basement room beneath a herbalist shop, a large, hand-drawn map of Ember Hollow was pinned to a wall. It was covered in colored pins and notes. Red pins for homes where the acquisition offers had turned into threats. Blue pins for businesses offered laughable buyouts. Yellow pins for buildings with sudden, mysterious code violations. It was a map of a war, street by street. Min explained in a low voice, his anger palpable. "They cut our water for maintenance. They send inspectors who find asbestos everywhere. Men in nice suits follow kids home from school. Jade Tiger's men. Jade Tiger." The name from Leo's report. The connection solidified, cold and hard. Mei-Ling left Ember Hollow that night with the map seared into her memory and a cheap, encrypted burner phone from Min. For emergencies, he'd said. She now had a network, Leo in the digital shadows, Rohan with his memory and his vision, and the watchful, angry eyes of the Hollow itself. She had leverage over Kaito, though using it was a nuclear option. She sat on her balcony in the silent, opulent Tan estate, looking at the glow of the Hollow in the distance. She was no longer just fighting for a seat at the table. She was building a different table entirely, out of broken blue tiles, charcoal sketches, and the quiet fury of the forgotten. The game had changed. She was no longer a piece on the board. She was becoming a player who intended to flip the board over. The Xanadu Star Gala wasn't a party, it was a state function for the Kingdom of Capital. Held in the crystalline biosphere of the Orchid Pavilion, it gathered the city's oligarchy, old money industrialists, new tech barons, and the politically connected in a glittering display of mutual reinforcement. For the Tans, it was mandatory theater. A unified front was required. Ariel had been planning for weeks, her anxiety a humming undercurrent in the house. "This is Serena's natural habitat," she'd murmured to Mei-Ling while overseeing the fitting for a gown she'd commissioned, a tasteful, icy blue sheath that made Mei-Ling look like a junior executive at a board meeting. "Just smile, be gracious, and support your sister. The Business Chronicle will be doing a feature." Serena's gala strategy was, as ever, a masterstroke. She had partnered with an avant-garde tech designer to create a living dress, a seemingly simple column of white silk that would, at the press of a hidden control, come alive with swirling, holographic projections of the Luminous Group and Celestial Bay logos, morphing into abstract patterns symbolizing innovation and synergy. It was a walking advertisement, a breathtaking fusion of fashion and corporate messaging. Mei-Ling looked at her own bland gown hanging in the closet. "Support your sister. Be harmonious." Echo the official line. She thought of the map in the herbalist's basement. Of Mrs. Chen's gnarled hands. Of Rohan's sketches gathering dust while the bulldozers metaphorically revved their engines. No. An idea, dangerous and perfect, began to form. She needed Rohan's eye and Leo's hands. The next day, in the dusty back room of the Blue Dragon, she laid out her plan. Rohan, sober and intense for once, listened, his architect's mind grasping the concept instantly. Leo, via encrypted call, chimed in with the technical possibilities. "I know a tailor," Rohan said, his voice rough. "Lao who?" "His shop is on Silkweaver's Alley. His family has been there 3 generations. Vanguard Acquisitions has offered him pennies. He's got bolts of fabric he'll never sell now. Scraps of stories." Lao Hu was a small, quiet man with eyes full of a profound sadness. His shop was a museum of beautiful textiles now deemed obsolete. When Mei-Ling explained what she wanted, not a dress, but a statement, he didn't smile, but a light returned to his eyes. He brought out remnants, a bolt of indigo-dyed silk from his grandfather's time, a swatch of brocade meant for a wedding Chong Sam never worn, scraps of intricate embroidery from festival banners. Rohan sketched not a gown, but a architectural silhouette, sharp shoulders echoing the angles of hollow rooftops, a skirt that fell in uneven, layered tiers like the overlapping roofs of the old neighborhood. It was defiant, beautiful, and slightly unsettling. Leo's contribution was microscopic. He sourced a batch of rare, photoreactive polymer fibers used in high-end environmental sensors. Woven into the fabric's lining, they were inert, invisible. "They react to volatile organic compounds and certain industrial particulates," Leo explained over the call. "Common byproducts of demolition, construction dust, diesel exhaust. The compounds bind to the fibers, causing a localized, irreversible color change from deep blue to a rusty orange red. It needs a trigger," Mei-Ling said. "A way to make the invisible visible." "That's the genius part," Leo replied, a grin in his voice. "It doesn't need a button. It just needs the environment they're trying to hide. We're it near a source of pollution, and it will slowly bleed. The stain becomes the message." The night of the gala, the Orchid Pavilion shimmered like a captured galaxy. Serena made her entrance to a soft chorus of gasps. Her dress was a marvel of light and illusion, painting her as a goddess of the new digital dawn. She clung to Kenji Watanabe's arm, who looked smug and possessive. Kaito was already near the bar, looking polished but hollow. Mei-Ling arrived alone. Her dress caused a different kind of stir. Whispers followed her, not of awe, but of confusion. It was clearly exquisite, the craftsmanship undeniable, but its aesthetic was raw, historical, slightly unrefined compared to the sleek, futuristic looks around her. It didn't sparkle, it absorbed light. Ariel's smile tightened upon seeing it. Jiahao gave her an appraising, unreadable look. An interesting choice. It tells a story, Mei-Ling replied simply. She moved through the crowd, a quiet anomaly. She exchanged polite words with Eris Thorne, who looked at her dress with deep curiosity. An homage to craft, he said. I appreciate that. As the night wore on and champagne flowed, Kenji grew louder, more belligerent. Serena's holographic display had been the talk of the gala, but Mei-Ling's enigmatic presence was a persistent, nagging counterpoint. He watched her from across the room, his jealousy curdling into rage. The moment came during the traditional group photograph of the city's leading families. As everyone arranged themselves on the grand staircase, Kenji, pretending jovial clumsiness, lurched forward with a full glass of dark burgundy wine. Oh, clumsy me, he exclaimed, not sounding sorry at all, and dumped the wine down the front of Mei-Ling's dress. A collective, horrified "oh" rippled through the elite assembly. Ariel looked ready to faint. Serena's face was a mask of perfectly feigned shock and sympathy. This was the ultimate humiliation, to be publicly stained, ruined, reduced to a mess. But the wine didn't spread like a normal stain. Instead of a dark blotch, where the liquid hit the indigo silk, a startling transformation began. The fabric didn't just darken, it changed. A rich, rusty orange red bloomed from the point of impact, but in a precise, intricate pattern, not a random splatter, but like the spreading roots of a tree, or the cracks in a wall. The reactive fibers, triggered by compounds in the wine, and perhaps the dust and pollution lingering on Kenji's own clothes from a site visit, were activating. Then, Leo, from his control point, made his move. He'd hacked the pavilion's ambient lighting system. As everyone stared at the stain, he killed the main lights and hit Mei-Ling's dress with a tight beam of ultraviolet. The dress glowed. The stain became a luminous, fiery map against the deep blue. But more than that, other, subtler patches on the skirt and shoulders, areas that had brushed against polluted air or tainted hands throughout the evening, began to glow a fainter orange. The dress was revealing a history of the night's invisible contaminants. In the stunned silence, Mei-Ling didn't flinch or cry. She looked down at the glowing, beautiful ruin of her dress, then directly at the Business Chronicle photographer, whose camera was now clicking frantically. It seems the past leaves stains that are hard to ignore, she said, her voice clear and carrying in the hush. This silk is from Ember Hollow. It's reacting to the truth we try to wash away with wine and words. She turned and walked, not to the exit in shame, but deeper into the crowd, a walking, glowing indictment. The story was no longer about a clumsy accident. It was about a dress that told secrets. The narrative shifted in an instant. Online, the images went viral. #BloodSilk, #EmberHollowTruth, #Galastain. The tech blogs obsessed over the reactive fabric. The social justice feeds decried the symbolism. The business pages fretted about PR disasters. Mei-Ling's face, calm, defiant, stained with light, was everywhere. In the limousine home, the silence was volcanic. Jiahao stared ahead, his face stone. Ariel was weeping quietly with fury and embarrassment. Serena looked out the window, her perfect composure finally cracked, revealing pure, undiluted hatred. Kaito was the only one who spoke, slurring slightly from drink. Well, sis. You sure know how to make an entrance. Back in her room, Mei-Ling carefully peeled off the dress. The glowing patterns were now permanent. She laid it across a chair, a battle standard. Her tablet buzzed with a message from an unknown number, likely Min in the hollow. It was a single emoji, a fist. Another message came from Leo: lights were a nice touch, huh? Servers are melting. Thorne just emailed you, subject line, fascinating symbology. And one from Rohan, just 2 words, she'd be proud. Mei-Ling walked to her balcony. The gala's glitter was far below. In the distance, Ember Hollow was a dark patch. She had torn a hole in the family's seamless narrative. She had weaponized a gala and turned a humiliation into a megaphone. The cost would be high. The war within the house was now open. But as she looked at the glowing dress, she knew something with certainty: she was no longer just fighting for a place in this world. She was fighting to change its very fabric. The glow of the gala dress faded, but the scorch marks it left on the Tan family's reputation were permanent. For 3 days, the house on the hill vibrated with a silent, seething tension. Meals were taken in separate rooms. Jiahao spent 18 hours a day at the Aurora Tower, managing the crisis. Ariel spoke to Mei-Ling only in terse, necessary phrases, her disappointment a physical chill. The public narrative had fractured beautifully, just as Mei-Ling had hoped. But the private cost was immediate. She was summoned to Jiahao's home study, a room of leather and dark wood that felt more like a tribunal chamber than a family space. "Sit," he said, not looking up from a financial digest. He let the silence stretch, a classic power play. Mei-Ling remained standing. Finally, he closed the digest. "You have a talent for spectacle. Unfortunately, the stock market is less appreciative of performance art than the social media feeds. Luminous Group shares have dipped 4%. The Phoenix Rise project is now under a regulatory microscope we spent millions to avoid." "The truth has a cost," Mei-Ling said, her voice steady. "The perception of truth," he corrected sharply. "You have painted this family as greedy villains and yourself as the noble rebel. A compelling story, if we were in a movie. We are not." He leaned forward, his eyes flinty. "Effective immediately, your liaison role with Celestial Bay is suspended. Eris Thorne appreciates symbology, but his board is nervous. You will also have no further access to the Phoenix Rise project servers or data. Your stake in this company entitles you to dividends, not sabotage." It was a lockout. A muzzling. She had traded her place at the table for a megaphone, and now they were taking both away. "Understood," she said, and left before he could see the hot sting in her eyes. It wasn't grief, it was rage. Kaido found her in the conservatory, pretending to read. He smelled of expensive cologne and underlying panic. "Well, you've certainly stirred the hornet's nest," he said, pouring himself a whiskey from the crystal decanter. "Father's furious. The board is calling for your shares to be frozen." "Is that what you're hoping for?" Mei-Ling asked, not looking up. "One less heir to split the pie with?" He laughed, a brittle sound. "Please. I'm the son. The pie is mine by right. You're just a temporary complication." He swirled the amber liquid. "But since you're so fond of the hollow, be careful. The people there, they're desperate. Desperate people do reckless things. They might try to use you. Or worse, blame you when things go wrong." It was a threat, clumsily veiled. She finally met his gaze. "Thanks for the warning, brother." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Any time." That night, in her digital fortress built with Leo, they planned their countermove. With official access cut, they went rogue. Leo had already mirrored the key Phoenix Rise servers weeks ago. Mei-Ling pored over the real environmental impact assessments Leo had exfiltrated, comparing them to the sanitized public versions. They were damning. She began drafting a whistleblower report, not for the media, but for the most dogged regulatory investigator she could find, a woman named Anya Sharma with a reputation for being unbribable. "We need to be airtight," Leo said, his face bathed in monitor glow. "Once we send this, there's no going back. It's declaration of war." "The war was already declared," Mei-Ling replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm just choosing my battlefield." She was so focused on building her case that she missed the attack on her flank. It began at 3:17 a.m. Mei-Ling's encrypted server, the one housing her whistleblower drafts, her communications with Rohan, her evidence on Kaido's debts, and Leo's mirrored data, was breached. Not with a brute force hack, but with a sophisticated, targeted keylogger that had been lurking in her system for days, possibly planted when she'd used a compromised terminal at the Luminous Tower. The hackers a professional grey hat group Kaido had hired through his Jade Tiger connections didn't steal the data. They augmented it. They inserted fabricated folders, emails, and schematics. They took Rohan's beautiful, theoretical sketches of a preserved Ember Hollow and turned them into detailed, cost-projected alternate plans authored by Mei-Ling. The plans were architectural nightmares, intentionally designed to be financially catastrophic, mandating the preservation of structurally unsound buildings, proposing gold-plated community centers with astronomical price tags, and slashing projected unit density by 70%. They even forged a damning email chain between Mei-Ling and Rohan Chandrasekhar discussing how to bleed Luminous dry with sentimental delays and run up costs until the board abandons the project. Then, at 6 a.m., as the city woke, they leaked it all. Not to a niche activist forum, but to the Xanadu Business Chronicle and the Financial Sentinel. The headlines exploded by breakfast. Eris's secret war. Mei-Ling Tan plotted To sink family's billion-dollar project from activist To saboteur. Leaked plans reveal Tan heir's costly sentimental crusade. The narrative flipped with breathtaking cruelty. No longer the brave truth-teller, she was now the hypocritical, treacherous daughter, willing to bankrupt her own family's company and jeopardize thousands of jobs for a personal, quixotic grudge. The leaked plans were quoted as evidence of her economic illiteracy and malicious intent. The sympathetic glow of the gala dress was extinguished, replaced by the cold light of financial treason. Her tablet and phone exploded with notifications, a mix of horrified messages from a few academy classmates, venomous comments, and urgent, furious summons from the family. Ariel's message was just a single line: "What have you done?" Jiaha didn't call. He simply sent a corporate security team to her room to confiscate all her devices and change the access codes to the house. She was effectively imprisoned. For the first time, a true, icy fear seeped into Mei-Ling's bones. This wasn't just smearing her character, this was a frame job designed to legally and financially annihilate her. They could sue her for damages, petition to have her shares voided for acting against the company's interest. She had one advantage: they didn't know about Leo. Using the burner phone Min had given her, a device that never touched the home Wi-Fi, she sent a prearranged distress signal, a single punctuation mark, to a secure chat app. 30 minutes later, a garden maintenance drone, reprogrammed by Leo, deposited a new, clean tablet and a portable satellite hotspot behind a loose stone in the east wall of the estate. Mei-Ling retrieved it during her allowed walk in the garden, under the watchful eye of a security guard. "They've painted you into a corner," Leo's message read. "The forgery is good. Very good. The metadata is a mess, designed to point back to you. Mei-Ling, can you prove it's fake?" "Leo, proving a negative is hard. But we can prove where it came from. The hack originated from a server cluster registered to a shell company. I'm tracing the payments. It's going to take time." "Mei-Ling, we don't have time. My father's lawyers are probably drafting the lawsuit now. We need the source. Follow the money, Leo. Not just to the hackers. To who paid them." She reached out to Rohan next, using an encrypted channel he'd reluctantly agreed to. His response was a furious, rambling voice note. "They used my work. They twisted Lean's dream into a cartoon of waste. I'm going to find the weasel who did this and break his fingers." "Rohan, listen to me," Mei-Ling typed, forcing calm. "Your anger is a weapon they want you to use. Don't. They'd love for you to storm into Luminous Tower screaming. It would confirm their story. We need your mind. Your memory. Look at the forged plans. Do you see anything? A detail wrong? A material specified that doesn't exist? A structural impossibility only an architect would spot?" There was a long pause. "Then, the steel alloy they specify for reinforcing the old engine house, it was discontinued 15 years ago. Unobtainable. Anyone actually trying to build this would know that instantly. It's a tell. It was a thread. A tiny, technical thread." Mei-Ling relayed it to Leo. For 24 hours, she lived in a state of suspended animation, a prisoner in her gilded room while her digital doppelganger, the scheming, incompetent heiress, was tried and convicted in the court of public opinion. Kaito avoided her. Serena passed her in the hallway once, offering a sigh of profound disappointment. "I wanted to believe in you, Mei-Ling. I really did." The break came from an unexpected direction. Leo, chasing the payment trail through a maze of cryptocurrency tumblers and offshore accounts, found a mistake. A single, impatient transfer from one of the shell companies hadn't been fully anonymized. It linked back to a payment processor used exclusively by a handful of high-stakes, underground gambling platforms in Xanadu. The same platforms Kaito was deeply in debt to. And the receiving account for the hacker's fee? It was held by Jade Tiger Capital. Leo connected the dots in a dazzling, visual flowchart he sent to Mei-Ling. "Look. Kaito owes Jade Tiger. Jade Tiger is the muscle for Vanguard Acquisitions, who work for Luminous. Kaito needs to get back in father's good graces and please his creditors. So he hires hackers, through Jade Tiger's contacts, to frame you. It discredits you, removes you as a threat to the project, which Jade Tiger/Vanguard want to proceed, and makes Kaito look like the loyal son defending the company. He gets his debt eased and his inheritance secured. It's a full circle. It was perfect. And it was their lifeline. But exposing it meant going nuclear within the family. It meant proving her brother not only a wastrel, but a traitor willing to orchestrate a cyber fraud that tanked the company's stock. Mei-Ling didn't hesitate. She compiled Leo's evidence, the financial trails, the server logs, the architectural tell about the discontinued steel. She wrapped it in a cold, precise narrative. Then, she didn't send it to the media. She didn't send it to the regulators. She sent it directly to Jia Haotan's private, secure server, with a copy to the head of the Luminous Group's internal audit committee. The subject line was simple: the source of the leak. 2 hours later, the household erupted with the sound of shouting. It came from Jia Hao's study. Kaido's voice, first defensive, then pleading, then hysterical. The smash of glass. Then silence. Mei-Ling remained in her room, her heart a hard, steady drum in her chest. She didn't feel triumph. She felt a grim, surgical satisfaction. An hour after that, her bedroom door unlocked electronically. No one came to speak to her. The silence from the family was absolute, deeper and more profound than before. Her personal tablet was returned, wiped clean. On it was a single new message from an anonymous internal address. It contained just the restored access codes to the Celestial Bay project servers and a one-line reinstatement notice. No apology. No explanation. The public story wouldn't change. The saboteur narrative was too useful to fully kill. But internally, the threat had been neutralized. Kaido had been checkmated. As night fell, a final message came through on her burner phone, from a number she didn't recognize. It wasn't Leo or Rohan or Min. You cut off one head. The body is still the beast. Your brother was a pawn. The game is older than you know. Your grandmother didn't fall. She was pushed. Ask your father who owned the mining rights to the valley where she died. The answer might steal your breath. Mei-Ling stared at the message until the screen went dark. The victory over Kaido suddenly felt small, insignificant. She had been peering into the shadows of the hollow, but a darker, older shadow had just reached out and tapped her on the shoulder. The chessboard was bigger than she'd imagined. And much, much more deadly. The silence in the Tan mansion after Kaido's fall was a living thing. It wasn't peaceful, it was the quiet of a forest after a predator has passed through, tense, watchful, littered with invisible wreckage. Kaido was gone, shipped to a development role at a luminous-owned desalination plant in a remote coastal province. No farewells, no explanations. His absence was a void that seemed to suck all sound into it. Mei-Ling moved through the house like a ghost. Her reinstatement to the Celestial Bay project was a hollow victory. The public still saw her as the saboteuress, a useful scapegoat the family hadn't fully disowned. Her father's gaze, when it landed on her, held no warmth, only a reassessment so cold it felt like a biometric scan. But the anonymous message burned in her mind, brighter than any public disgrace. Ask your father who owned the mining rights to the valley where she died. It was a key being offered, but to what door? And who was offering it? She started in the only place she could, the digital archives. Her restored corporate access gave her entry to decades of financial records, subsidiary filings, and asset ledgers. She began cross-referencing dates. The year her grandmother, Lin Tan, disappeared. The locations of Luminous holdings back then. It was Leo who helped her crack the archaic filing system. They digitized this in the 90s with the grace of a drunken elephant, he muttered over their secure line. But look, subsidiary holding companies. Cascading layers of them. A Russian doll of obfuscation. After 2 days of painstaking virtual archaeology, they found it. Sable Ridge Resources. A mineral extraction company formed a year before Lin's death. Its stated purpose, exploratory mining in the northern Azure Valley, the exact region where Lin had gone hiking. Sable Ridge was wholly owned by another shell, which was owned by another. Leo followed the trail, his fingers a blur. It's a maze, but the ultimate beneficial ownership, it's not a Tan holding. Who? Mei-Ling asked, her throat tight. It traces back to a family trust. The Watanabe Charitable Legacy Trust. The world seemed to tilt. Watanabe. Kenji's family. The shipping magnates. Her father's oldest allies, the co-hosts of galas, the fellow board members. The family whose son had publicly humiliated her and whose father, Sajin Watanabe, was Jia Hao's frequent golf partner. Her grandmother died in a valley where the Watanabes held secret mining rights. A year after her death, Sable Ridge Resources was quietly dissolved. No mining ever commenced. Coincidence is the refuge of the lazy, old man Fong had once told her while gluing a kite spine. Look for the tension in the structure. The tension led her back to the physical archives, a climate-controlled vault in the basement of Aurora Tower. She went late, using her keycard during a shift change. Among rows of gray boxes, she found the one labeled Lean Tan, Personal Effects, returned. It was heartbreakingly light. A pair of worn hiking boots. A compass. A water-stained journal with entries stopping 3 days before her disappearance. And a single, unmarked envelope of photographs. Most were scenic shots. But one, tucked between images of mountain peaks, was different. It showed 3 young people, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning with the invincible arrogance of youth. They stood before the foundation of a new building, the original Luminous headquarters, she realized. On the left, a fierce-eyed, beautiful young woman, Alara, Serena's mother. In the center, a younger, softer-looking Jiahao, his smile not yet hardened into its current line. And on the right, a handsome, broad-shouldered young man with Kenji's arrogant jawline, Sajin Watanabe. They didn't look like business partners. They looked like siblings. Like a triumvirate. On the back, in faded ink, was written, the 3 pillars. Breaking ground, breaking rules. 87. Mei-Ling's breath caught. Alara wasn't just Jiahao's half-sister. She was part of the founding trio with Sajin Watanabe. The alliance wasn't just business, it was personal, deep, and old. What had Rohan said? Alara was going to publish an investigation into the board's property deals. Was her investigation into the Watanabes? Into her own friends, the pieces were a horrifying puzzle: a grandmother who opposed a board and died near Watanabe mining rights. A journalist and investigating property deals who died in a fire. A project that benefited both the Tans and the Watanabes. A son, Kaito, in debt to Watanabe-linked loan sharks. She was so absorbed she didn't hear the footsteps until they were at the archive door. She slipped the photo into her sleeve just as Serena stepped into the pool of light. Serena looked like she hadn't slept. Her usual perfection was frayed, her eyes shadowed. She wore a simple robe, and she carried no pretense, no calculated smile. She looked, for the first time, like a real person terrified. "I knew I'd find you here," Serena whispered, her voice raw. "Digging up graves." Mei-Ling stood, closing the archive box. "What do you want, Serena?" "I want to stop lying." The words hung in the cold air. Serena wrapped her arms around herself. "I know you think I'm a monster. A porcelain doll happy to smile on the stage while the machine grinds people up. You're right. And you're wrong." She took a shuddering breath. "My mother. Alara, she left me a letter. To be opened on my 18th birthday. I read it the night before you came home." Mei-Ling stayed silent, letting the confession unfold. "She told me everything. That she was Jiahao's half-sister. That she and Jiahao and Sajin Watanabe were like family. That they built Luminous together. And that she discovered something terrible about the source of their early capital. About the Watanabes. About the bodies buried under their first big deal." Serena's eyes were wide with remembered horror. She was going to expose it. The letter, it was a warning. She wrote, "If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. Trust no one. Not even Jiahao. Especially not Sajin. Run, Serena. Don't try to be a hero. Just run." Tears spilled over, cutting tracks through her pale skin. "But I was 16. Where could I run? I had nothing, no one. So I did the opposite. I clung harder. I became the perfect Tan daughter. I thought if I made myself indispensable, if I was useful, I'd be safe. I thought if I helped them get what they wanted, they'd never have a reason to silence me, like they silenced her." The truth landed like a physical blow. Serena's every act of cruelty, her every desperate grab for favor, it wasn't just greed. It was the frenetic dance of a bird trapped in a cage with a snake, trying to sing so sweetly the snake wouldn't strike. "You knew," Mei-Ling said softly. "You knew about the fire being no accident." "I suspected." The letter confirmed it. Serena wiped her cheeks with a trembling hand. "And then you came. This wild, fierce thing from the gutter, with our mother's eyes and no fear. You were everything I was too cowardly to be. And you were a threat. To my safety, to my carefully constructed survival. So I fought you. I framed you. I hated you. She met Mei-Ling's gaze, her own full of a desperate, aching honesty. But you kept getting back up. You beat Kaido. You're digging into things that got our grandmother and my mother killed. You're either going to get yourself killed, or you're going to tear the whole rotten structure down. She stepped closer. I don't want to run anymore. And I don't want to be their smiling puppet anymore. I'm tired of being afraid in this beautiful house. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Help me. Let me help you. We're not sisters by blood, but we're sisters in this gilded prison. Our mothers were silenced for asking questions. Let's ask them together. Let's be the ones who finally get the answers. Mei-Ling stared at her, searching for the lie, the manipulation. She saw only a raw, terrified hope. The photo in her sleeve felt like it was burning. She thought of the map in Ember Hollow, of Rohan's grief, of the anonymous tipster. She had built an alliance of outcasts. Could she bring the Golden Princess into the fold? Was it strategic genius or suicidal trust? The mining rights in the Azure Valley, Mei-Ling said, testing. Watanabe held them. Did you know? Serena's eyes widened further. She shook her head. No. But it makes a sickening sense. The Watanabes have always been the muscle. The side of the business that deals with messy things. My mother's investigation was into their portside dealings, their labor relations. But it must have led her deeper. Mei-Ling made a decision. She pulled the photograph from her sleeve and handed it to Serena. Serena took it, her breath catching at the sight of her mother's young, alive face. Her fingers traced Alara's features. The 3 pillars, she read the inscription, her voice breaking. She loved them. And they killed her. We don't know that for sure, Mei-Ling said, though every instinct screamed it was true. We will, Serena said, lifting her head. A new hardness shone through the tears. A resolve. What do you need me to do? Access, Mei-Ling said immediately. You have it. To social circles, to old family albums, to the whispers at the charity boards. The Watanabes, the old board members. Be my spy in the sunlight. I'll work in the shadows. Serena nodded, a sharp, decisive movement. And in return? In return, Mei-Ling said, when this is over, we rebuild Ember Hollow. Not with Phoenix Rise. With your mother's integrity and our grandmother's vision. We build something that doesn't need ghosts to keep it standing. A real smile, fragile but genuine, touched Serena's lips for the first time. A dialogue with the wind, she whispered, recalling the phrase from Mei-Ling's Thorn presentation. Exactly. They stood in the silent archive, 2 daughters of different mothers, bound by legacy and loss. The alliance was forged not in affection, but in necessity and a shared desire for a reckoning. As they parted ways in the hallway, Serena paused. Be careful, Mei-Ling. Sajin Watanabe, he's not a clumsy boy like Kenji. He's a shark who has been swimming in these waters for 40 years. If he senses a threat, I know, Mei-Ling said. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone in the knowledge. Back in her room, she looked at the city lights. She had a spy in the enemy's court. She had a hacker, an architect, and a community ready to fight. And she had a secret that could shatter the oldest alliance in Xanadu. The 3 pillars were cracked. And she was the earthquake. The alliance with Serena was a delicate, untested thing. For days, they communicated through encrypted notes left in obscure places, a loose book in the library, a potted plant in the conservatory. Information flowed cautiously. Serena reported that Sajin Watanabe had grown quietly displeased with the delays to Phoenix Rise. He'd made a pointed comment to Jiahao over cigars about sentiment being a luxury in business. The pressure was building. Then, on a night when a dry, slicing wind held down from the mountains a hollow's breath, the locals called it the pressure exploded. Mei-Ling was reviewing structural analyses with Leo via hologram when her burner phone vibrated with an alert from the community watch app Min had installed. It was a single, blaring siren emoji and a location tag, Blue Dragon Tea House. Seconds later, her official phone rang. It was Serena, her voice stripped of all its cultured polish, raw with panic. Mei-Ling. There's a fire. The hollow. The Blue Dragon. I have a live feed from a friend nearby, it's bad. Anne. Lauhu's shop. The old engine house. It's all at once. Mei-Ling's blood turned to ice. All at once. This was no accident. This was a surgical strike. A message written in flame: stop resisting, or everything you love burns. I'm going, Mei-Ling said, already pulling on a dark, durable jacket and boots. I'll meet you there, Serena said, and the line went dead. Meet you there. The poster girl for Phoenix Rise, running toward the inferno meant to clear the land for her project. The absurdity of it was almost laughable. The sky over Ember Hollow was an angry, pulsating orange. From the heights of Celestial Hills, it looked like a hellish sunset blooming in the wrong place. As Mei-Ling's sky taxi descended, the scene clarified into chaos. The narrow streets, never designed for emergency vehicles, were choked. Fire trucks sat helplessly at the perimeter, their hoses snaking toward the three distinct pillars of smoke and flame. The ancient, dry timber of the buildings was perfect fuel. She pushed through the crowd of terrified, angry residents, their faces lit by the flickering glow. She found Min near a makeshift command post, his face smudged with soot. Rohan, he gasped. He was in the Blue Dragon, upstairs. He wouldn't leave his sketches. The staircase is gone. They're trying to get a ladder to the back window. Without a word, Mei-Ling ran. The heat from the burning tea house was a physical wall. The beautiful blue tiles were cracking and popping. She saw firefighters aiming a weak stream of water at the adjacent building, trying to contain the spread. The ladder, someone yelled. It's too short. Mei-Ling looked up. On the third-floor rooftop terrace, the one where she'd first met Rohan, a figure slumped against the low wall, coughing. The back window. She remembered the rickety external fire escape on the building next door, the one old Mrs. Chen had warned her about. Min. This way. She sprinted down an alley, circling behind the row of buildings. The rusty fire escape was there, trembling in the heat. She didn't hesitate, climbing 2 rungs at a time. The metal shrieked in protest. At the top, a 4-foot gap separated this roof from the Blue Dragon's terrace. Below was a deadly drop into a narrow, burning crevice. Across the gap, Rohan lifted his head. He held a metal case clutched to his chest, his portfolio. His eyes met hers, wide with pain and shock. Throw it, she screamed over the roar of the fire. He seemed to understand. With a grunt of effort, he shoved the case across the gap. It skidded to her feet. Now you, she yelled. He shook his head, pointing to his leg. It was bent at a sickening angle. Broken. Just then, a new voice cut through the din. Mei-Ling. Here. On the street below, Serena had arrived. She'd come straight from some evening function, still wearing a ludicrously elegant silver gown now smudged with ash. She was directing 2 burly men in civilian clothes, her personal security. Mei-Ling realized, who were carrying a long, heavy extension ladder from a nearby construction site. Against that wall. Now. Serena commanded, her voice cracking with authority. The men obeyed, slamming the ladder against the side of the building next to Mei-Ling. It reached the roof. Get him to the ladder. Serena shouted up. Mei-Ling looked back at Rohan. The gap was too wide for him to jump, broken leg or not. She scanned the roof. A length of old electrical cable, coiled near a dead satellite dish. She grabbed it, tied one end around a sturdy vent pipe, and hurled the coiled end across the gap. It landed at Rohan's feet. Tie it around your chest. Under your arms. We'll pull you. It took an agonizing minute. Rohan's fingers fumbled with the cable, his face white with pain. Finally, he gave a thumbs up. Mei-Ling braced herself, pulling with all her might. She felt more than saw others join her. Men and another young man from the community appeared beside her, adding their strength. Slowly, agonizingly, they dragged Rohan across the gap, his broken leg trailing. He screamed once, a short, guttural sound, then fell silent, passed out from the pain. They got him onto the ladder. Serena's security team climbed up to help carry him down. On the ground, Serena was a different person. The socialite was gone. She was organizing a bucket brigade from a still-functioning hydrant, her silver gown soaked and filthy, her hair a wild mess. She was shouting instructions, comforting a weeping child, her face a mask of soot and fierce determination. A news drone buzzed overhead, its camera capturing the surreal scene, the tan heiress in rags pulling an architect from a fire, and the adopted golden girl in a ruined ball gown commanding a bucket line, both working to save the neighborhood their family was supposed to be eradicating. The fires raged for hours before they were contained. The Blue Dragon's interior was gutted, its beautiful carved wood turned to charcoal. Lau Hu's shop was a total loss, centuries of fabric samples and history gone to ash. The old engine house stood, but its roof had collapsed. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink to match the settling ash, the community gathered in the street, shell-shocked. Rohan was on a stretcher, his leg stabilized, clutching his salvaged case. He looked at Mei-Ling, then at Serena, who stood shoulder to shoulder with her, both of them filthy and exhausted. "The safe," Rohan croaked, his voice ruined by smoke. "What safe?" Mei-Ling asked. "In the tea-house cellar." Lean, she had a small vault installed. For her real plans. Behind the false wall in the wine cellar. The fire wouldn't have reached it, if the floor above held. The cellar was a blackened, wet cave. The floor above had held, barely. Using crowbars and flashlights, Mei-Ling, Serena, and Min cleared the debris where Rohan directed. They found the false wall, its plaster blown away by the heat, revealing a dull steel door with an old-fashioned combination lock. The combination, Rohan whispered from his stretcher where they'd carried him to the entrance. Her birthday. Backwards. Mei-Ling knelt in the muck. She spun the dial. The lock clicked with a solid, satisfying thunk. Inside the small, fireproof vault was a time capsule. Rolls of pristine architectural vellum lean tan and young Rohan's complete, glorious plans for Ember Hollow, far more detailed and radical than the sketches he'd saved. And a leather-bound journal. Mei-Ling opened it. The handwriting was bold, assertive. She flipped toward the end. The final entry was dated 3 days before Lean's disappearance. Met with Sajjan today. He laughed off my concerns about the Azure Valley site. Called me a nervous old woman. The arrogance. The core samples his geologists took show trace elements that match the waste from his old shipbreaking yards. He's not looking for minerals. He's looking for a place to hide something. Or someone. I told Jiahao. He said I was imagining things, straining the alliance. But I saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear for me. Fear of Sajjan. My own son is afraid of the monster we helped create. I'm going north tomorrow. To see for myself. If this journal is found, know it was no accident. Below that, a single line was scrawled, the ink different, rushed, Jay knows. He won't stop it. For the company. For the legacy. God help us all. Serena, reading over her shoulder, made a small, choked sound. Jay. Jiahao. She looked at Mei-Ling, her eyes reflecting the horror in the journal's words. He knew. He knew what Sajjan was, and he let her go. The evidence was in their hands. Not just corporate greed, but conspiracy. Accessory to murder. The morning news channels were already playing the footage, the two Tan sisters, united in the ashes. The narrative of family feud and sabotage was crumbling in real time, replaced by a more potent image, solidarity. As they stood in the ruined cellar, the weight of the journal in her hands, Mei-Ling knew the final battle had just begun. They had the proof. But the man who had inspired such fear in their father was still out there, powerful and ruthless. The fire had been meant to erase history. Instead, it had forged an unbreakable bond and uncovered the very truth meant to stay buried. They walked out of the cellar into the harsh morning light, covered in the soot of the past, carrying the future in their hands. The journal was a live wire in the quiet of Jiahao Tan's study. It lay on his desk, its leather cover still faintly smelling of cellar damp and old fire. Mei-Ling and Serena stood before him, still in their smoke-stained clothes, united not by affection, but by the grim truth they now shared. The sun streaming through the windows felt obscene, too bright for the darkness they were about to unveil. Jiahao looked from the journal to their faces, his own a carefully neutral mask, but a vein pulsed at his temple. You retrieved this from the fire? It was never lost, Mei-Ling said, her voice flat. It was hidden. By your mother. Because she knew she was in danger. From your friend. She opened the journal to the final entry and placed it in front of him. She didn't need to point, his eyes found the damning lines. She watched as he read his mother's words. I saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear for me. fear of Sajin. And then the final, terrible scrawl, Jay knows. He won't stop it. The silence that followed was profound. The mask didn't crack, it petrified. When he finally looked up, his eyes were decades older. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "From a safe in the Blue Dragon, a safe you never knew about," Serena answered, her own voice trembling with suppressed fury. "My mother died for asking the questions your mother was asking. And you knew. You knew what Sajin was capable of, and you did nothing. You let your mother walk into a trap. You let my mother burn." Jiahao flinched as if struck. For a moment, the CEO vanished, and there was only a haunted, middle-aged man cornered by the ghosts of the women he'd failed. "You think it was that simple?" he rasped. Sajin Watanabe wasn't just a business partner. He was the necessary shadow. In those early days, capital came with strings. His family provided the leverage, the enforcement, when persuasion failed. We were young. We told ourselves it was temporary. That once we were strong, we could cut those strings. He stood, turning his back to them, looking out at the city he ruled. By the time I realized the strings were chains, it was too late. He owned secrets that could have sunk Luminous before it ever sailed. And he had a taste for cruelty, disguised as pragmatism. When my mother confronted him, he trailed off, his shoulders slumping. I warned her. I begged her to let it go. I thought I could protect her by making her back down. I was a fool. He saw her as a loose end. And Alara? Serena's question was a dagger. Jiahao's head bowed. She was digging. She wouldn't listen. Sajin assured me he would handle it. Dissuade her. I wanted to believe him. I told myself he meant bribes, threats, not fire. The confession cost him. His voice broke. The call came in the middle of the night. The fire. I knew. In my gut, I knew. And I chose the company. I chose our legacy over justice for my own sister. The room swam with the poison of the truth, finally aired. Mei-Ling felt no triumph, only a vast, cold sadness. "So what now?" she asked. "The journal is proof. Of conspiracy, of motive. We take it to the authorities. We finish what Grandmother Lean started." Jiahao turned, his face ashen but his eyes now sharp with a desperate, calculating light. "You take this public, and you won't just destroy Sajin Watanabe. You will destroy Luminous Group. The scandal, the lawsuits, the regulators, it will be a bonfire that consumes everything. Thousands of jobs. The pensions. The charitable works. Your mother's legacy, Serena. Your grandmother's life's work, Mei-Ling. Ashes." It was the same argument, the same toxic calculus that had silenced 2 generations. "Then we burn it," Mei-Ling said, shocking both Serena and Jiahao. She saw the flare of hope in her father's eyes before she extinguished it. "We burn the old, rotten structure to the ground. And from the ashes, we build something new. Something clean. But first, Sajin falls. On our terms." Her plan was audacious, dangerous, and relied on the very alliance Sajin sought to break. They would use the journal as bait, but not for the police. They would draw him into the open. It was Serena who delivered the message, through channels she knew Sajin monitored. A shaky, fearful video call. "Uncle Sajin. I found something. In the fire. Lean Tan's journal. It has lies about you. About my mother." Jiahao is furious. He wants to go to the press. "I have it. I can give it to you. But I need protection. From him. From all of this." She played the terrified survivor perfectly. Sajin Watanabe, from his office aboard his luxury yacht the Silent Partner, took the bait. His avuncular charm was a thin veneer over cold menace. "Of course, my dear. You are like a daughter to me. Bring it to me. We will fix this, as a family." He named a place, a private dock at the old, Watanabe-owned North Star shipyard, a maze of derelict warehouses and silent cranes on the city's industrial edge. That night, Mei-Ling's alliance mobilized. Leo took control of the shipyard's decommissioned security camera network, giving them eyes. Rohan, from his hospital bed, provided schematics of the complex from his early career. The people of Ember Hollow, led by Min and old Mrs. Chen's network, became their ground troops, spreading through the shipyard's shadows like ghosts, phone cameras ready, drones quiet in the night sky. Jiahao, faced with the imminent, violent endgame of his compromises, made his choice. He provided the one thing they needed, a live, encrypted feed to the commissioner of the Financial Crimes Unit, Anya Sharma, the unbribable investigator Mei-Ling had once targeted. He would bear witness. The shipyard was a cathedral of rust and shadows. Serena walked alone down a long pier, a decoy journal in her hand, a tiny camera in her hairpin. Sajin waited under a bare bulb, flanked by two silent, broad-shouldered men. "There you are, child," Sajin smiled, his teeth white in the gloom. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" Serena asked, her fear evaporating, replaced by a glacial calm. She stopped, out of reach. "You killed my mother." Sajin's smile vanished. "A tragic accident." "The journal, please." "It's not here. But the police have it. And the live feed of this conversation is being watched by the Financial Crimes Unit." "Right, Commissioner Sharma?" Sajin's face contorted with fury. He didn't panic, he adapted. A signal to his men. "Then we do this the hard way. We'll find it. And you, my dear, will have another tragic accident. History repeats itself." His men moved. But from the shadows, other shapes emerged. Man and a dozen young Hollow residents, armed with pipes and tools, blocked the pier's exit. From the warehouse rooftops, the red dots of laser sights from Leo's hacked surveying equipment danced on the chests of Sajin's guards. The difference this time, Mei-Ling's voice echoed from a loudspeaker Leo had patched into the yard's PA system, is that the family you're trying to silence isn't standing alone. Chaos erupted. Sajin, cornered, made a desperate grab for Serena. But Serena, the porcelain doll, didn't break. She'd taken self-defense classes for years, a secret rebellion. She drove the heel of her palm into his nose with a sickening crunch. He staggered back, howling. It was then that Jiahao Tan stepped from the shadows, flanked by two of his own security, and Anya Sharma in a crisp uniform, her officers securing the scene. "It's over, Sajin," Jiahao said, his voice carrying a lifetime of regret and newfound steel. "The alliance is broken. The silence ends tonight." Sajin, blood streaming down his face, laughed a wet, horrible laugh. "You fool. You think you can survive without me? The secrets we buried, Jiahao, they'll drown you with me." "Then we'll learn to swim in the truth," Jiahao said, and nodded to Commissioner Sharma. As Sajin Watanabe was led away in handcuffs, the live feed still streaming, the old Dynasty died on that rusty pier. The fallout was cataclysmic, but not a bonfire. It was a controlled demolition. Jiahao Tan, in a stunning public address, acknowledged historical failings and grievous moral errors in the company's past. He announced his immediate resignation as CEO, endorsing a new interim leadership board that included Mei-Ling and Serena, alongside independent ethical overseers. He voluntarily handed over all evidence to the authorities, triggering investigations that would topple several other corrupt old guard families. The Phoenix Rise project was scrapped. In its place, the Ember Hollow Renewal Cooperative was announced, a partnership between the Tan Family Trust, the residents of the Hollow, and the architectural vision of Rohan Chandra Sekhar, now sober and fiercely dedicated. The funding came from a significant portion of Jiahao's personal wealth and the redirected capital from the Celestial Bay Partnership, which Eris Thorne enthusiastically supported, calling it innovation with a soul. On a clear autumn day, Mei-Ling stood with Serena on a scaffold overlooking the Hollow. Below, the careful work of preservation and rebuilding had begun. The Blue Dragon's shell was being stabilized, its beautiful tiles being meticulously replaced. Lao Hu had a new, larger workshop to train apprentices. "He's leaving, you know," Serena said softly. Jiahao was moving to the coastal province, to the quiet house near the desalination plant where Kaito now worked a menial, supervised job. A self-imposed exile. "I know," Mei-Ling said. "Do you forgive him?" Mei-Ling watched old man phone below, instructing young people on how to repair a traditional roof beam. "I don't know. I understand him. That's different." She looked at Serena. "What about you?" Serena was silent for a long moment. "He loved my mother, in his way. And he was a coward. I can hold both those truths. I don't need his love anymore. I have a job to do." They stood together, not as rivals, not as sisters by blood, but as partners. The heirs to a broken legacy, tasked with building something new. That evening, Mei-Ling returned to her balcony at the Tan mansion. It didn't feel like a cage anymore, it felt like a command post. Her tablet buzzed a message from Leo, now officially heading cybersecurity for the new cooperative. Another from Zach, his acceptance letter to Triton Uni in hand. A sketch from Rohan. A market analysis from Min. She looked out at Xanadu City, glittering and flawed, beautiful and brutal. She had climbed from its gutters to its pinnacle, and found the pinnacle was rotten. So she was building a new peak, one others could climb too. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of fresh-cut wood from the hollow and distant rain. It was a clean wind. A wind that carried whispers of the past, but no longer the screams. Mei-Ling Tan, once a girl from Brick Lane, now the architect of a new dynasty, breathed it in. The game wasn't over. It had just changed. And for the first time, she was writing the rules.